I bought this top at the weekend, and when I bought it I didn't realise it would make me practically invisible in front of the shrine. So I'm really glad I didn't get the matching bottles. So we're nearing the end of our theme for the year, and the theme for the year has been this image here, which is called the refuge tree of the tree Ratnasambhava Buddhist order. And this is it's a symbolic image of the three jewels of Buddhism: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the sameness. So at the centre we have the historical Buddha, and somewhere at the top we have some archetypal forms of Buddha. Then in the background we have Dharma texts, and then all around we have representations of the Sangha. So we have the Buddha's own disciples, we have various historical teachers from the past, we have archetypal figures, and then we have the founder of the True Ratnasambhava Buddhist order, Sangharakshita, and his own teachers. And it's an image of how the Buddhist tradition has come down to us here in Sheffield, here and there. And this is the last talk in a little series on the mandala of the five Buddhas. The mandala of the five Buddhas. These are archetypal forms of the Buddha that have developed over the centuries, and they grew out of people's meditation experience in history. And they give us a feel for different aspects of enlightenment, because all the aspects of enlightenment can't be captured in one image. And when we dwell on these forms, we're awakening those qualities in ourselves. We're awakening our potential and transforming our depths. So if we were just simply to reflect on abstract qualities, we'd mostly be engaging our rational minds and using words and concepts. But by dwelling on archetypal qualities in human appearance, we can get a deeper feeling for those qualities. We engage our emotions. We have a chance to imagine what it might be like to be a being with those qualities. It really takes us into the depths of who the Buddha actually was. So a lot of the time, it's as if we're living our life in this dingy, dark attic room, which is an analogy. And we're at the centre of this room, and there's maybe a desk and a chair, and there's a candle lit. And we choose to stay at the centre of this room, because that's the only place where there's light. We don't feel like looking into the unseen corners of the room. And we just want to stay in the area that we're used to. But there are windows in this room. The problem is they're all covered with these horrible, dusty Venetian blinds. And they're keeping the room dark. They're keeping us unaware of what's in the corners. But if we can draw the blinds, we see each window lights up a particular corner of the room, and it lights it up with a particular colour. So in the last few weeks, we saw that the window in the west of the room, the red light of Amitabha shines through, and it shines a light on a capacity in us for a greater and purer love and compassion. And then in the north of the room, there shines the green light of Amoghasiddhi, which shines a light on our capacity for greater fearlessness and action. And then last week we saw that in the east of the room, there's a light through which shines the blue light of Akshobhya, which shines a light on our capacity for facing reality without being blown around. So we've got one left in the south of the room, and through this window shines the yellow light of Ratnasambhava. And as we'll see in the talk, this yellow light, it shines a light on how we can give ourselves more fully, on a sense of inner richness and resourcefulness. And Ratnasambhava offers the wisdom of sameness, which transforms the mental habits of pride. Next picture, please. So this is Ratnasambhava. So Ratnasambhava is a rich golden yellow colour, and he wears fine silk robes, embroidered robes, and jewels. he's sitting in meditation on a golden yellow lotus. In his left hand he holds a dazzling jewel, and his right hand is stretched out in the gesture of supreme giving. And you can't see it in this particular picture, but Ratnasambhava is supported by horses. And you can see very well in this picture that Ratnasambhava dwells in a realm of great abundance. It's an archetypal realm of great abundance, golden palaces, lush vegetation, great beauty. The pujas that we often do at this centre in the first section often evoke the abundance of this type of realm. So we get lists of things like healing herbs, clear refreshing waters, mountains made of precious stones, vines blazing with flowers, trees whose branches bend low with delicious fruits, wishing trees with fruits of jewels, lakes adorned with lotuses, and the endlessly fascinating cry of wild geese. But there's also human beings in this realm. There are poets, musicians, sculptors, all industriously creating great works of beauty, and they're really, really relaxed because they haven't got to worry about all the usual everyday things that we have to worry about, because Ratnasambhava provides everything that you could ever want. Showers the world with precious things. He's overflowing with rare and precious things. And this whole realm, there is love and wisdom and happiness always increasing and overflowing. So the first time I walked past an image of Ratnasambhava, it was in the community, and I was stopped in my tracks by it. And the reason that I noticed it was the colour. There's nothing else particularly I noticed about it. It's deep, rich, golden yellow. And it's quite often the same when I'm walking in the countryside. If I see yellow flowers, there's something about yellow for me that just stops me in my tracks. It's fascinating. It draws me towards it. And it's quite difficult to explain that response. So colour cuts through the rational mind. It has a direct response on our depths. It's actually part of the archetype, it's part of the symbolism. And it evokes an emotional response in us. So I didn't have a rational response, so I didn't think, I wonder which part of my brain is being stimulated by this particular wavelength of light. I didn't have a psychological response. I didn't think, I wonder if it's because I liked custard when I was younger. I stopped and I looked at it and I was affected by the colour. So it's important we don't try too quickly to explain away our responses to colour, to attach fixed meanings. But having said that, there are traditional associations with the colour yellow which do hint at the qualities of Ratnasambhava. So the first one is the midday sunshine, suggesting life-giving energy. There's a series of pictures there. It's said to be the colour of sunlight on golden core, suggesting growth, fertility, maturity. It's the colour of harvests, rich harvests, suggesting abundance, creativity and productivity. And it's the colour of gold. Precious, rare, delightful, fascinating, but most of all, suggesting wealth and richness. And then, as I started to read about Ratnasambhava more, the next thing I became interested in was the fact that he was supported by horses. So I've never been particularly interested in horses in the past. But I started to identify the quality of energy in me with what I saw in the energy of the horse. I started to make connections between myself and the horse. So however domesticated a horse is, there's always something a bit unpredictable, a bit edgy, a bit wild about the horse. And I sort of recognised that in myself. So the horses could be seen to represent us as we are, with all our rough, unpredictable, untamed edges. Horses are also noble, upright creatures. And the horses that are raising up Ratnasambhava, they're not subjugated by the whip, they're not even bribed with sugar cubes. They're serving freely out of a sense of devotion, out of a sense of love and friendship. A couple of years ago, I was on a retreat at Padmaloka, and it was a retreat called the Mythic Context, so it was sort of 2 weeks of dwelling in mythic realms. And every afternoon I used to go and visit a nearby field which had 3 horses in it. And part of me was that I was investigating this interest in horses. And what I used to do was just go and stand at the gate and wait. I didn't try and call them over. I sort of saw it as a practice of patience and receptivity. And I thought, they just keep coming here every day and standing. At some point they're going to come to me. And they didn't. They carried on doing horsey things and nibbling grass. They occasionally came a bit closer, and they were a bit curious, but they wouldn't come closer. They wouldn't come to me. And but I really wanted them to come to me, but they wouldn't. And near the end of the retreat, things were getting a bit tough, as they do on those sorts of retreats. I was very opened up, and I was quite upset about a number of things. And I went back to the field, and I just stood there, and I sort of forgot that what I was doing was waiting for the horses to come, and I was just upset. I was just quite emotional. And one of the horses came, and he let me stroke his nose, and he breathed into my ears, and I could sort of sense the power of the horse. And then he went away. And I don't know if I should say this, but at the beginning of the week, I named the horses Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And the one, well, guess which one came? Well, guess which one came? Sangha. So, this just reminds me of this idea that horses, the horses of Ratnasambhava they're willingly offering their service, and they're doing it out of friendship and love and devotion. Horses are also very powerful, very strong and very fast. They're strong enough to raise up the throne of Ratnasambhava, to raise up the higher goal of Buddhism. And they're quick enough to take him to the aid of beings who need his wisdom and compassion. I'm a great fan of Lord of the Rings. My dad didn't give me much choice. And one of my favourite characters in Lord of the Rings was an animal. It was the Lord of the Horses called Shadowfax. And he was a friend of the wizard called Gandalf. And there's a particular part of the story where king in a far-off land sends a message that he needs help through a series of beacons across the mountains. And then Gandalf calls on Shadowfax and takes him as fast as the wind to the aid of the king. If we can find a worthy cause to harness ourselves to, like these horses, our raw, wild energy can be unlocked, can be transformed and channeled, so that we stop holding back and new resources become available to us. I'll be talking more about this later in the talk. Next picture, please. So the right hand of Ratnasambhava is stretched out in the gesture of supreme giving. But in Buddhism, there's a very broad view of what giving means, what we can give. And there's a traditional list of things that we can give, ways that we can give. So the first thing that we can give are the basics, the material basics. And at the time of the Buddha and throughout history, there would have been times when basic need for clothing, food and shelter would have been very real. And it's still relevant today to respond to those basic needs. But we could also include this in this, the giving of gifts, just the straightforward giving of gifts, the small acts of generosity. I'm very fortunate to share a room with Sheffield's own archetype of generosity, Symbolism. And every time I'm going to give a talk, or every time there's a bit of a difficult thing going on, I find treats lying on my bed, little cakes and bits of chocolate and apples and things. And I benefited from that before this talk. I got a yummy fruit and nut bar, which I've eaten. And recently I came back from retreat, and I came back from retreat on the day of Amoghavampa's birthday. And he wasn't very well, and it was his birthday. But no one had signed up to cook in the community, so he cooked a slapping meal, and he just said, "You come back from retreat, I couldn't let you come back to not having a meal." I was just really moved that he'd done that, even when he was not feeling very well, and even when he'd be justified in thinking, it's my special day, I'm the birthday king. So the more we can get into the habits like that of small acts of generosity, or big acts of generosity, the more we are, as the Pali Canon calls it, making ourselves devoid of the stain of stinginess. I love that. Making ourselves devoid of the stain of stinginess. We're reversing the tendency to always try to get what we want in life. And we're seeing through the mindset that somehow the universe owes us something. And the next thing we can give is fearlessness, confidence. So by developing these qualities in ourselves, by developing qualities for wisdom, compassion, generosity, fearlessness in ourselves, we can spark others off, we can almost infect them with that. We can give others the confidence and the courage to do the same just by working on ourselves. Third one on the list is education and culture. Through giving education and culture, we're giving others the means to expand their hearts and minds. And then giving them life and limb. So again, this would have been very real at the time of the Buddha. Jungles with wild animals, and also throughout history. These days it's unlikely that we would need to sacrifice life and limb for others very often. But I think it's good to foster that spirit. That spirit that we're prepared to put ourselves on the line for other people. That we're prepared to make sacrifices. The spirit that we're giving all of ourselves. Our time, our friendship, our love, our energy. So the American poet Walt Whitman writes, "Behold, I do not give lectures or a little charity. When I give myself. I have stores plenty and to spare, and anything I have I bestow." So for me, the modern day equivalent of life and limb is really giving yourself, just giving all of yourself as much as possible. And then there's giving merits. So near the end of the sevenfold puja, which we do on festival days, there's a section called the Transference of Merits, which starts, "May the merit gained in my acting thus go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings." So we're cultivating the spirit that the spiritual life is not about accumulating good fortune for ourselves, but for enriching anyone you come into contact with. And then finally, it's the gift of the dharma. And traditionally, this is the most important thing that we can give. This is the greatest gift. So whether it's through direct teaching or conversation, lending someone a book that you've read that's really good, just set an example in your life. The gift of the Dharma is the greatest gift because we're connecting people with the means to realise their full potential. And traditionally, the right hand of Ratnasambhava is giving the 3 jewels. That's what he's giving. He's giving the 3 jewels to the world. And there's also another archetype of a horse, which is called the wind horse. The wind horse goes fast as the wind through the sky. He lives in the sky. And on his back he bears the 3 jewels. So the greatest gift is the Dharma. Next picture, please. But probably the most interesting thing for me about Ratnasambhava has always been the relationship between what's going on with the two hands. So with one hand he's giving, but in the other hand he's holding this dazzling jewel. So jewels are rare and precious. So they're of great value. They're often described as being priceless in Buddhist sutras. They open up new possibilities. The word Ratnasambhava has two translations. It can mean he who was born from a lotus. It can also, Sambhava can also be translated as possibility. So you can translate it as the possibility of a lotus. Jewels are a sign of wealth and abundance. But this isn't just any old jewel. This jewel is called the wish-fulfilling jewel, the Chintamani. So with the wish-fulfilling jewel, we'll just grant you any wish, anything that you could ever want, it will grant it. But Buddhist tradition also describes the mind as a jewel, particularly a mind that's set on enlightenment, set on awakening for the benefit of others. And it says that even if you had a wish-fulfilling jewel, even if you had a jewel that could grant you anything that you wanted, more precious than that is the mind that's set on enlightenment for the benefit of others. The 8th century Indian monk Shantideva writes, "May I be an inexhaustible treasure for those who are poor and destitute. May I be their servant and give them all that they need." So in that quotation, poor and destitute suggests just about every human being. It's not particularly referring to people who live on streets. The state of living as a human being is often described as a state of suffering, a state of destitution in those sutras. 22 years ago, it was the first time I went to Calcutta. And I've mentioned this before in the talk, but I'll just say it again briefly. So I worked in a Mother Teresa hospice, and it was described as, well, they had two descriptions. The official description was the place of the pure heart in the Catholic tradition, but it was locally known as the hospice for dying destitutes. So these were real destitute people. These were people who lived on the streets, they were dying on the streets, and this place was just somewhere where they could die in a bit more comfort, with a bit of friendliness. So there was a team of volunteers. We used to go in and offer food and medicine. I didn't speak Bengali at the time, so I just used to sit with people and just somehow try and communicate. I didn't feel very inexhaustible. Day after day, I just felt completely emptied by the experience. I felt spent and I felt helpless. It was a really important time of my life. It changed the direction of my life. But day to day, it was really harrowing, actually. And it's an extreme situation, but many times in my life, I was in situations where I genuinely wanted to help people. I genuinely wanted to give myself to others. But at the same time, there was a strong sense of lack, a strong sense of limitation. I didn't have a particularly good opinion of myself. I didn't have a particularly broad sense of what I could achieve in my life. And part of my reason for giving was to compensate for that, to compensate for this sort of sense of lack in me. But soon, in every situation, I'd reach a point where I would feel emptied, I would feel exhausted, I would feel drained, and I would sort of withdraw from the situation and take stock and look after myself. So I wasn't giving from a sense of abundance. There wasn't a jewel in my hand. There was just this sense of inner emptiness. I wasn't an inexhaustible treasure. Sometimes we're in situations and we are giving a lot, and we do need to take some time to recuperate, and that's very valid. But I'd say that usually the problem is not actually giving too much, but it's that sense of lack in us, that sense of not being quite up to it, not quite having the resources, that sense that we have to hold enough back for ourselves. And this is a sort of poverty mentality. So, and it's not surprising that we have that. We live in a world of rampant consumerism. Life revolves around getting more and more, better and better. And happiness is defined by that somehow. How could we possibly be happy with the latest this or the latest that? It's a world which conditions us to think that we need so many things to fill that void in us. And it's a world which conditions us to see other people mainly in terms of satisfying our needs for pleasure and security. And there's nothing terribly wrong about all that, but it is a form of poverty mentality. It's a form of limitation. But the Buddha had a radically different message, a much more expansive message. The Buddha taught that happiness comes from inside, from a sense of inner peace, inner abundance, inner expansiveness, from a sense that we do have the resources and we do have the qualities deep inside us. So Buddhism takes us from a poverty mentality to a riches mentality. And Ratnasambhava particularly is a symbol of this, a symbol of moving from poverty to riches. When we have that sense of inner richness, we're able to give more freely, more spontaneously, a bit less stingily, a bit less begrudgingly, in a way that we don't feel empty by. But most of us don't have a wish-fulfilling jewel up our sleeves. So how can we cultivate some sense of inner abundance, that sense of inner abundance which allows us just to give a bit more freely, a bit more courageously? So I'm going to give a few suggestions. This isn't a traditional list. It's in my head. This is a Maitridasa list. Okay, first one is to value what you're doing already. Okay? So we're actually, through steadily applying ourselves to Buddhist practice, we're actually doing a lot already. And it's important not to undervalue what we're doing. So by making ethical changes in our lives, gradually, over the years, we're resolving inner conflicts which free up more energy for us. By simplifying our lifestyles, we make more resources available. By meditating, we're gradually increasing our awareness of the depths of our being. And in the Metta meditation, it's as if we're making ourselves more permeable. We're softening the barriers between ourselves and others in those 5 stages. So, because we're more permeable, we're more able to tap into the richness that's around us in others. By learning more about the Dharma, we're mining the riches of the Buddhist tradition. When we take part in devotion, we can see it quite literally as drawing inspiration directly from the life of the Buddha himself. And of course, by being part of a Sangha, we're learning to see ourselves less in terms of our own limited resources and more in terms of combining our resources with others. And all of these things that I've mentioned, they set up really positive effects which ripple out through time and space. And we can feel really confident that these effects will be benefiting others throughout time and space. Many others that we'll never meet, people in different parts of the world, people in the future, and those effects will outlive us actually. So when we just reflect on the things that we're doing and why we're doing them, that can give us a sense of richness actually. And then we can give ourselves wholeheartedly to meaningful tasks, so a bit like the horses. So as with the horses, if we can harness ourselves to collective projects, meaningful projects, our raw energy can be unlocked and new resources just seem to emerge from nowhere. So those of you who came to the summer fair will remember that it was a day that was sort of all about abundance actually. And if I was to put it in a puja, which I have, this is how I'd put it. I offer gardens blazing with foxgloves, teeming with happy visitors enjoying the sunshine. I offer the wish-fulfilling garage, overflowing with generous donations. I offer beings with arms stretched low, with backs bursting with offerings. I offer the endlessly fascinating supply of mysterious objects. I offer the abundant fruits of the labour of troops of joyful volunteers. It really was an abundant occasion, a joyful occasion. So, in whatever way you can, getting involved in Sangha projects is a really good way of connecting with abundance. A good example of that, a week on Sunday is the Sangha Works Day. Sorry, a week on Saturday is the Sangha Works Day. There's various things like that that happen through the year. We've also got the Evolution Shop, particularly towards Christmas. It's a good opportunity to sort of get involved with a really sort of strong team spirit, trying to create something worthwhile. So my third suggestion is to rise to challenges. So sometimes life throws up opportunities to stretch ourselves. We usually feel a bit resistant, but in my experience is when I can respond to those opportunities, I actually have to dig deeper into myself. Just through digging deeper, I discover new resources. So earlier in the year, while this wonderful Buddha was being unveiled on Buddha Day at Sheffield Buddhist Centre, I was in India, I was in Nagpur, and I spent Buddha Day at one of our main centres in Nagpur. And so I arrived on the day, someone had invited me, and I was told first thing in the morning as I arrived that I'd be giving the keynote address. And hundreds of people, I mean, Nagpur's a Buddhist city. And anyone who knows me knows that I like to plan talks well in advance. And it's like I need to read loads of books, which is really important, but there's almost a sense that I have to look outside of me to find inspiration to give the talk. And there I was, I had an hour and a half. And give a talk on the Buddha, okay? And, I did it. And just through doing it, I just got a sense of, there are actually resources inside me. I have built up some reserves already through a few years of practice. And it's really good to just experience that, some sense of inner resources. And if I hadn't been given that opportunity, which was quite uncomfortable, then I wouldn't have discovered that actually. Just discovered that actually already there is enough to respond to quite a lot of situations. So the next one might be a bit controversial for some Buddhists, but do things that you like doing. Do things that you like to do. So it's important to notice what activities actually nourish us, what give us enjoyment, and just to do more of those. Otherwise, spiritual life will just get a bit dry. And the main principle that we just have to bear in mind is that we're not harming ourselves and we're not harming others. But other than that, just do what gives you enjoyment, what gives you pleasure, and what nourishes you. And there's no prescribed list in Buddhism about what you should enjoy. So there's not a particular playlist on iTunes for Buddhists. There's not particular poetry books that you read to become a good Buddhist. So it's quite important just to take notice, what do I actually enjoy? For myself, I had this sense that there are certain things that I should be doing to enjoy. I should be reading certain sorts of poetry, listening to certain sorts of music, and that would somehow refine me. But actually what I realised was I just have to take notice of what I actually do enjoy. It's thrown up some peculiar surprises. So one thing that I seem to enjoy doing, which gives me a sense of abundance, is Bengali translations. I sit in the community room, it's a sunny day, and I think, beautiful countryside, I'll go out for a walk. No, I'll just do a Bengali translation. And I think what it is that it connects me with this whole other part of my life, which is in India. And just through immersing myself in the language, I connect to that different part of myself. So just get that sense of an expanded Maitridasa in that language. Another one is playing tennis. I play tennis occasionally with Dan Rutter. And I really love it because I can make really angry noises. I get in touch with my aggression. I notice that I've got a body. And I get quite absorbed actually. And we have a good laugh. And always afterwards I just feel just a bit richer. So, they're my examples, but just really take notice, what do I actually enjoy, and do more of that. Next thing we can do is spend time in beautiful surroundings. So this could be places of natural beauty, it could be artistic beauty. Through being in those situations, we can absorb, we can imbibe the beauty and abundance of life around us. And this is my final India story of the talk. So one of the reasons I go to India every year, you'll notice that I'm absent every now and again, is I go and visit young people that I used to work with in the 90s. And there's one particular young person, he lives in quite a remote rural area. And to get to his village, I have to travel on a train, packed train, and then there's a jeep journey. So this is no ordinary jeep journey. So it's a normal sized jeep with 35 people. 15 people inside, 5 on each side hanging off the edges, 5 hanging off the back, 10 on top. I always go on top, it just somehow feels safer. But from the top of the roof of this jeep, you get this really wonderful panoramic view of rural Bengal. Just a sense that there's life everywhere. So just in all directions, green paddy fields, many varieties of fruit trees, people harvesting rice, jute, wheat. There's vegetation everywhere. When I think of Bengal, I just think green, that's all I think of. There's vegetation climbing, bursting, just pouring out of everywhere, because it's a tropical environment. Animals everywhere, cows, goats, chickens, buffaloes, and in places that you wouldn't expect, strapped to the back of rickshaws, walking down the middle of the road, just everywhere. And people, even though it's a rural environment, there's people everywhere as well. So you've got children swimming in ponds, playing marbles by the side of the road, except when the jeep comes, playing cricket, people carrying huge bundles of sticks and other things on their head, working in the fields, sitting under huge banyan trees, sitting in tea stalls in the afternoon. You get people making these things that look like kebabs out of cow dung, squeezing cow dung into sticks and putting them out to dry, and that's to make fuel. People on the tops of buses, on the tops of jeeps, on the backs of rickshaws, hanging off the edges of trains. So just on that short 20-minute journey, I just feel like I'm sort of immersed in the abundance of life, just soaked in it, and somehow just feel really expanded. And it's not a romantic view of life. You know, there's a lot of difficult things to look at as well, but it's life in all its glory. We'll all have situations that we associate with the abundance of nature, beautiful natural places of great art and culture. And these places, these situations help us to feel a part of life, rather than objective spectators or consumers. A lot of the time we're spectating or we're consuming actually. We learn to feel a solidarity with the whole of life, not just the beautiful bits. Nature in all its beauty and its brutality. We can start to feel ourselves as a thread in the whole fabric of things, to see how everything flows in and out of everything else. And also to cultivate a sense of appreciation. So when we're in nature, most of the time, there's things that we can't own, there's things that we can't control, there's things that we can't exploit or use. And it's a really sort of valuable opportunity just to cultivate an appreciative mind. My last suggestion for how to cultivate a sense of inner abundance is to make space in your life. So many of us in the modern West lead busy lives, where we move from task to task, without pausing much for breath. So life becomes one long to-do list. Certainly, my life sometimes feels like one long to-do list. And this mentality even spills over into days off. So it's my day off and I'll wake up and I'll think, what are the things I need to achieve today to make it a worthwhile day off? And so almost mentally I'll make a to-do list for what one should do on a day off. And so I think it's really important, I'm going to try it, is now and again just to have a day that's free of to-do lists, a to-do list free zone. Day with no plans, no goals, no aims and objectives, no particular purpose, no particular direction. Because when we actually take time to pause, we can often touch base with a deeper part of ourselves, a richer part of ourselves. things we were unaware of have a chance to bubble up to the surface. In a piece called Pauses and Empty Spaces by Sangarashta, he writes, when Mozart was asked what was the most important part of his music, he did not say the melody or the harmony, but simply the pauses. A life which consists of a frantic stream of external activities is like music which is uninterrupted sound. It is the pauses which make beautiful the music of our lives. It is the empty spaces which give richness and significance to our lives. So you might want to have a go of a few of those. Now, as we apply ourselves steadily to our practice, we eventually arrive at situations where we realise actually that we have to let go in some way, to let go of things, or to let go of habits, or old views that just sort of don't work anymore, views of ourselves. So, the hand of Ratnasambhava is an empty hand. And this reminds us that we're not only giving to or giving away, but there's a sense that at times that we're giving up also, we're letting go. Shantideva writes, enlightenment is the giving up of all, and it is enlightenment my heart yearns for. And what we're letting go of mainly is a sense of being fixed and separated. We're letting go of our preoccupations with what we want out of life, what we want for ourselves. We're letting go of self-centeredness. We're letting go of always measuring other people in relation to ourselves. So what gets in the way of giving ourselves and discovering our true potential is that strong, fixed sense of self. I am I. This is me. This is mine. This is myself. This is what I think. And this is conceit. This is pride. The Buddhist word for pride or conceit is mana. And again, in Buddhism, there's not just one form of pride. So usually with pride we think of puffed upness, like that form of arrogance. But Buddhism goes through very different sorts of subtle variations of pride. So the first one is the comparing mind. And it's whether it's comparing yourself as superior to others, equal to others, or inferior to others. But they all stem from that comparing, measuring, judging mind. So the superiority is when we look down on others. We see them as being somehow less gifted than us, maybe. We have an inflated value of ourselves, and that we relish our position over others. And sometimes we insist on being recognised for that position. It may well be that we are actually genuinely gifted, but this is sort of giftedness gone wrong. It's a misplaced giftedness. And then equality. This is sort of a fundamentalist approach to equality. So sometimes we insist that we're as good as those that clearly, in some respects, are better than us at things. More advanced than us, more developed than us. And in the name of equality, we as if we become blind to higher qualities, higher spiritual qualities. So, I don't know, maybe someone's given a particular responsibility or a job, and in your mind you're saying, "Oh, I could do that." But you know full well that they could do it better than you. But there's a sort of stubborn part of you that wants to think that equality is this fundamental quality that's set in stone in all situations. And then there's inferiority. So sometimes we get into the habit of always seeing ourselves as not as good as others, not being able to make progress, not having potential, in fact being uniquely incapable of change. In my case, the Buddha got it wrong. And again, this habit prevents us from just simply appreciating all these qualities. I've had this at different periods through my life. I used to play the saxophone when I was younger, and started getting into jazz. And quite often my response just to going to see someone who's really brilliant jazz saxophonist or a brilliant jazz pianist was, "Oh, I can never be as good as that." And it wasn't, "They're wonderful." That came a bit later. The first response was, no, can't be as good as that. And sometimes it applies to watching people give talks. Some people are just brilliant at giving talks. Daniel, Vajratara, Padmavajra, loads of people in the movement. A particular one that I have in mind was Dharma Day, actually, when Vajratara gave her a short talk, which she gave it with no notes, and she was just, it was like she was radiating this stuff. And probably about the same time, I had a thought which was saying she's really good at this, and a thought was saying, I can never do that. I'll never be able to do that. I'll never be able to be as good as that. So it's that mind that instantly wants to compare, to measure myself. Sometimes in the team situations, it is valid, we do have to make judgments about who's best suited for a task. We want people to play to their strengths. There is a sense that we do need to use a comparing mind. But that's quite different from the ingrained mental habit of measuring and fixing ourselves in relation to other people. The Buddha described an enlightened person as having an even-mindedness where arrogance is impossible. One makes no comparisons with the rest of the world as superior, inferior, or equal. And then we'll move on to self-absorption. So, quite simply, this is seeing ourselves as the centre of the universe. I do that quite a lot, most of the time. It's a real strong identification with our own feelings, our own wants, our own views, opinions, perspectives. It's as if we're holding tight to that so much, we're unable to put ourselves aside. And we give that so much weight that it closes us off from the experiences of other people. Boasting is probably the twin brother of superiority. So yeah, boasting, getting carried away with our own qualities, our own achievements. Always subtly trying to draw attention to what we're good at, to our giftedness, trying to take the credit. Sometimes we actually overestimate how developed we are. False humility, so this is really making a show of how humble you are, which is sort of paradox, but making a show of deferring to other people, maybe bowing and scraping just a bit too much. And then there's inverted pride. With inverted pride, it's like upside down pride. As if we're advertising our own weakness, we're advertising our own faults to get attention. We make a show of our ignorance or our ethical shortcomings. Maybe we're always being the one who makes the inappropriate comment or the rude joke to get a laugh in the room. So all of these things, all of these forms of pride, they're rooted in that sense of lack, which we're trying to compensate for. And in all these ways, we try to occupy a fixed, special place in the universe. It's my place. But the Buddha taught emphatically that any fixed possession has to be transcended. It has to be overcome. Life is fluid, life is mysterious. In fact, if we look deep enough into life, life is nothing but change. So the idea of a fixed position is nonsense. Sangharakshita describes pride as the negation of the possibility of development. The negation of the possibility of development. Buddhism is all about change, it's all about movement, it's all about development, it's all about great potential. It's about realising that this is not myself. These feelings, these labels that I put on things, these mental stories, these moods, they don't define who I am. They don't define what I'm capable of. And this applies to everyone. It unites us with everyone else. At a deep level, we're all the same in that regard. And this brings us to the particular wisdom that Ratnasambhava offers. It's the wisdom of sameness. Or I've started to think of it as the wisdom of not that specialness. The wisdom of seeing that we're not that special in some regards. We're not that different from other people. We're all part of this great caravan of existence. We all have longings, we all have fears, we all want to be happy, we all long to be free from suffering, and we all have great potential. And that's exactly the reason that the Buddha decided to teach. He decided to teach a path that would allow others to realise the potential that they have for the awakening that he'd experienced. He saw that all beings have the potential to follow that path, so he decided to teach. So this is another symbolism of the jewel of Ratnasambhava. Jewels are mined from the depths of the earth. They're formed over long periods of time, under conditions of great heat, great pressure, seismic forces. So the jewel represents the deep potential in us to become wiser, kinder, happier, more creative, and more awake. If we look back to the image of the attic room, the jewel represents all those dark, unseen corners where there are loads of resources, but we don't allow ourselves to look into them. As Buddhists, we go for refuge to the three jewels of Buddhism: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And but in some ways, there's a jewel in us also. There's this jewel of a great potential, and we can think of that as the fourth jewel in a way. So when you put loads of jewels together, they start to set each other off. They all the sparkling of one jewel reflects on another jewel. They all sparkle together. I know that from having worked in evolution for 6 years. And when we're going for refuge to the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, it's like that jewel in us is resonating with those jewels, or that the jewels of the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha are drawing that jewel out of us. So it's as if the wisest part of ourself responds to the Buddha. The truest part of ourself responds to the Dharma, and the most selfless part of us responds to the Sangha. Ratnasambhava shows us that the way to transform pride is to identify more with others, to think more in terms of what we can give to others. And when we do that, it becomes less obvious actually than who's actually doing the giving and who's doing the receiving. Shantideva writes, "I should dispel the suffering of others because it is suffering like mine. I should help others because of their nature as beings, which is just like my own being. When happiness is liked by me and others equally, what is so special about me that I strive after happiness only for myself?" But in practice, this wisdom of sameness, shows itself as a willingness to work together, a willingness to cooperate with others, to open up to others, to reach out to others with hospitality. Ratnasambhava is the great archetype of hospitality, is the great host. To put other people at ease, to try and enrich other people's lives, and just to help each other unfold our potential through whatever means. And it's really a great relief when we can let go of the need to be special. So much energy we've spent in our lives protecting ourselves, defining ourselves, limiting ourselves, advertising ourselves. When we can just start to let that go, all that energy becomes available for achieving something truly worthwhile. Much more is possible when nobody is anxious about being special, because there's a chance for all those energies to flow in the same direction, to become concentrated, to become directed. And it's as if we're mysteriously, by doing that, as if we're inviting this flood of positive energy into existence that's somehow bigger than the sum of all our parts. And we can often experience that as if it's a force that's working through us. I hesitate to mention this. So I've been watching a bit of the Olympics, and I was watching the 10,000 metres final the other day, and what struck me was just how much people wanted to be enthusiastic about something, how much people wanted to be inspired by something, and how much they were able to take pride in someone else's success. And of course, this is very limited. This is we're identifying ourselves as a nation in that regard. Buddhism is a much more magnificent vision. In Buddhism, we're seeking to identify ourselves with the potential of all human beings. when I was talking about pride, I was talking about the negative forms of pride, all the negative forms of pride, but there is such a thing as skillful pride in Buddhism. So skillful pride is a healthy confidence that we can achieve something worthwhile. Together we can achieve something. And the difference is that this sort of pride doesn't fix us, it actually unfixes us. So we can be part of something that we can rightly feel proud about. And yeah, with that healthy sense of pride, we can say the words together, the words of Shantideva. Today my life has borne fruit, and my humanity has been fulfilled. Today I have become one of the Buddha's clan.